Then I am myself the world. Expand your mind. You might remember a photo that went viral a few years ago. It was all over social media. The picture showed a striped dress that was blue and black. Or was it white and gold? The online debate got pretty heated. And while it might seem like a silly meme, the discussion about the dress is actually very revealing. It shows how our perceptions can differ hugely, even when we're looking at the same thing. The dress is just one example from Then I Am Myself the World, in which Christoph Koch helps to unravel the mysteries of the mind. Koch is a leading expert on consciousness. And while he doesn't claim to have all the answers, he offers some fascinating insights. What does it mean to be conscious, exactly? And how can we expand our consciousness? You'll find out in just a moment. Just so you know, we'll be keeping things simple. We won't be going into Koch's more complex ideas, such as his work on integrated information theory. But whether you're curious about the science behind our senses or the profound effects of transformative experiences, this summary offers a journey into the essence of our awareness. You might just discover new ways to expand your own consciousness, enriching your understanding of both yourself and the world around you. Consciousness is what we experience, so what do we mean by consciousness? According to the neurophysiologist Christoph Koch, who spent decades studying consciousness, it boils down to this: experience. To be conscious is to experience things. As conscious beings, we have so many different types of experiences. Let's go through some of them now, so we can appreciate just how complex and amazing our consciousness really is. First off, we have the obvious, the five senses of sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste, which help us to experience the world. We also have our imagination, though the ability to imagine and visualize things can vary hugely from person to person. Another form of consciousness is something called interoceptive percepts, experiences associated with physical sensors. They keep us anchored in the physical world and keep us alive. Hunger, for instance, it tells us that we need to eat. Then we have emotions, the basics like anger and anxiety, as well as more complex, composite states like saudade, a Portuguese word that captures the longing for something that's been lost forever. But senses and emotions only form part of our conscious experience. We also have self-awareness and metaconsciousness, the ability to reflect on an experience. Then there's dreaming, daydreaming, and zoning out. Our minds are constantly wandering. Finally, we have another category of conscious experience that relates to the loss of self. This can happen through flow state, meditation, or something more extreme, like a psychedelic trip, or even a near-death experience. These states of consciousness are particularly interesting, so we'll look at them in more depth later. But for now, let's take a moment to appreciate how incredible it is to be conscious at all. We all have an intimate understanding of what life feels like. Which leads us to another question. Do you and I experience life in the same way? Do we share the same reality? The short, and maybe surprising answer, is no. We each experience our own reality. In 2015, a photo of a dress went viral. It was a simple picture of a dress with horizontal stripes, but it proved surprisingly controversial. Was the dress white with gold lace, or blue with black lace? The picture led to heated debates, with some convinced that the dress was white and gold, and others equally convinced that it was blue and black. And if you're wondering what the real color of the dress was, well, there's no objective answer. Color is a construct of the mind. The brain automatically makes assumptions, based on a variety of factors, and then comes to a conclusion about what color the object is. The dress is an interesting example of how people's realities can be very different. There's huge variety in our brains, to such an extent that there's really no such thing as neurotypical. So it makes sense that our conscious experience varies too. Perception of color is just one example of how our realities differ. Some people experience face blindness and are unable to recognize someone they've met, while others are super recognizers, never forgetting a face. Some of us have incredibly vivid imaginations, while others can't picture anything at all. Most of us have an inner voice and a near constant internal monologue, but not everybody does. Something that tastes unbearably spicy to you might taste delicious to someone else. The list goes on. And while an individual difference, like sensitivity to spice, may not seem that significant, these variations have profound implications. As Coke puts it, we are all living in our own perception box. We're all stuck in our own individual reality. We can only experience what our brains allow us to experience. That might sound depressing, that we live our entire lives in our own little box, experiencing a different reality from everyone else. But we're not powerless. We can expand our box in all kinds of ways, through reading books and watching movies, for example, to get a better understanding of other people's experiences. Our boxes and our brains are malleable. And by changing our brains, we can also change our realities. We can influence our reality. You've probably heard of the placebo effect. In a medical context, it's when a patient is given harmless medication, such as a sugar pill. The pill calms the patient, but it's not designed to actually cure a condition. And yet, sometimes it works. For instance, studies show that SSRIs, the standard treatment for depression, are only slightly more effective than a placebo. Or to put it another way, the placebo works nearly as well as the drug. Strange, right? But it shows the power of mind over matter. The takeaway here is that our beliefs and expectations can affect the outcome. The more strongly we believe a pill will work, regardless of what it actually contains, the more likely it is that it will have an effect. And this doesn't just apply to health. In all aspects of life, your attitude matters. Do you see yourself as a victim? Or do you see yourself as strong and in control, doing your best in the face of adversity? To a great extent, what you think will become reality, or at least, what you personally experience as reality. But in a way, that's all that matters. When Coke moved from sunny California to the gloomy Pacific Northwest, he promised himself he would never complain about the weather. He told himself, there's no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothing, and a bad attitude. And you know what? It worked. His attitude transformed his experience, making it much easier to adapt to a new climate. A more extreme example comes from Viktor Frankl, the Jewish psychiatrist who spent years in Nazi concentration camps. Frankl wrote the famous book A Man's Search for Meaning, where he argued that even in the worst conditions, even when you're imprisoned, freezing cold, and starving, you're not completely powerless. You can choose how to interpret your circumstances and find meaning in your suffering. That brings us back to the idea of the perception box. You're not imprisoned because you can expand the walls of the box. You can rewire your brain thanks to something called neuroplasticity. Although it gets a little harder as we get older, we're always capable of learning new things and thinking new thoughts. And there are specific ways we can open up windows of neuroplasticity and even expand our consciousness. Next, we'll find out how. Ways to expand consciousness. Buddhism teaches that there's no true self, no permanent essence that defines you. But what does exist is the experience of self, the endlessly chattering I in your mind. Sometimes, a sense of self is useful when you're working towards a goal, for example. But that inner voice can also be exhausting, leading us to obsess and brood. You may have noticed that when you're really absorbed by an activity, in a state of flow, the self goes quiet for a while. As you focus on climbing, let's say, or coding, you can momentarily escape that sense of I. It feels good, but it doesn't last for long. As soon as you lose focus on the activity, the self returns. However, some experiences in life have a more powerful impact. They allow the individual to expand their consciousness, escaping the ego and transcending the self. Cope calls these experiences transformative experiences and puts them into three categories. First, there are spiritual or aesthetic experiences. Sometimes they're religious, with the individual feeling like they're in the presence of God. But the experience could also be the result of awe at the majesty of nature, for example. The primatologist Jane Goodall once had a profound experience in a forest. She wrote, "The self was utterly absent. I and the chimpanzees, the earth and trees and air, seemed to merge, to become one with the spirit power of life itself." Similarly, on board Apollo 14, the astronaut Edgar Mitchell felt an overwhelming sense of oneness and connectedness. The second category of transformative experiences are psychedelic, induced by hallucinogenic substances. Under the effect of drugs such as LSD, psilocybin, or ayahuasca, people often lose their sense of self and feel a deeper connection with the world. Some say they've encountered God or the divine. And finally, we have the third category, near-death experiences. While they're not always positive experiences, there are some intriguing similarities in reports from survivors. They often describe seeing a bright light at the end of the tunnel or a vast expanse. As they approach death, they experience a sense of peace, the loss of ego, and sometimes the presence of the divine. In Koch's opinion, all these transformative experiences, from the religious to the hallucinogenic, most likely have a common mechanism in the brain. Let's say someone's in the midst of a profound experience. They feel at one with the universe, and they've lost all sense of time, as well as their sense of self. It doesn't matter whether that experience is the result of religious fervor or a high dose of LSD. Either way, a study of their brain would probably show a state of reduced neuronal activity, a quiet neocortex. That would explain feelings like loss of self or the sensation of a vast expanse. Of course, not all of these transformative experiences are easily accessible. You can't just choose to have a spiritual awakening or to narrowly survive death. But you can, in theory, choose to take psychedelics. And while Koch doesn't advocate the use of psychedelic drugs, he can't deny the extraordinary impact they've had on his own life. The transformative potential of psychedelics. Once, Koch found himself surrounded by dark smoke. The space around him broke into hexagons, shattering completely before he fell into a black hole. And then, he died. There was nothing left of him. No self. Nothing remained but pure experience. Koch's psychic death was caused by a powerful hallucinogen commonly known as the toad. The Colorado River toad produces a substance containing 5-MeO-DMT, a psychedelic with remarkably intense effects. Koch's trip was one of the most powerful experiences of his life. While the feelings of energy, ecstasy, and terror soon subsided, other effects continue to this day. Koch lost his fear of death and discovered a new sense of tranquility. Increasingly, attitudes to psychedelic drugs are changing. Although they're still illegal in most parts of the world, there's a lot of interest in their therapeutic benefits. Scientists are particularly interested in psilocybin, the hallucinogenic substance found in certain mushrooms. For instance, just one high dose of psilocybin can have transformative effects for cancer patients. Studies show that after taking psilocybin, the patient's levels of anxiety and depression decrease significantly. They're able to find meaning in their lives, while also accepting death. The research continues, with numerous clinical studies investigating the potential of MDMA, as well as psilocybin. It's believed these drugs may be able to treat a range of conditions, including migraines, depression, chronic pain, PTSD, and various addictions. The way things are going, it seems likely that MDMA and psilocybin-assisted therapy will become available in the US and Europe in the not-too-distant future. You may be wondering, what about the risks? Of course, as with any drug, there's always some element of risk. But unlike many other drugs, psychedelics are non-addictive. And when used in a responsible way, in a suitable environment, with the right set and setting, the risk is minimized. Also, it could be argued that in many cases, the extraordinary benefits of psychedelics outweigh the risks. If a single dose can give someone a mystical experience and help them overcome their fear of death, isn't that worthwhile? The power of psychedelics is that they create a period of enhanced neuroplasticity in the brain that lasts for weeks. They allow an individual to rewire their brain, changing their worldview. However, while psychedelics are popular because of their rapid, dramatic results, they aren't the only way to expand consciousness. Hypnosis, yoga, meditation, and breathwork are just a few examples of practices that can be helpful. Ultimately, the aim is to expand our perception boxes, to become open, curious, and compassionate, while discovering a world beyond the limitations of self. Transformative experiences are within reach for all of us. And while they may be fleeting, what they leave behind is priceless, a sense of the sublime, and a glow that lingers in our daily lives. Final summary. The main takeaway of this summary to Then I Am Myself, the World by Christoph Koch is that consciousness is essentially the experience of being aware. There are many different kinds of conscious experiences, including our five senses, imagination, self-awareness, metaconsciousness, dreaming, and daydreaming. Interestingly, our perception of reality can differ significantly from one person to another. For example, the viral debate over the color of the dress showed that people can see the same thing in completely different ways. Our brains create individual perception boxes, influencing how we interpret the world. Our attitudes and beliefs can also shape our reality. The placebo effect, for instance, shows how believing in the efficacy of a treatment can lead to real improvements in health. Our expectations make a huge difference. Transformative experiences, such as spiritual awakenings, psychedelic trips, and near-death experiences, can expand our consciousness by temporarily quieting the self. These experiences can profoundly change our perception of life. Psychedelics, in particular, are being studied for their potential therapeutic benefits, offering rapid and dramatic changes in consciousness and mental health. Ultimately, expanding our perception box can lead to greater openness, curiosity, and compassion, enhancing our experience of life. Okay, that's it for this summary. We hope you enjoyed it. If you can, please take the time to leave us a rating. We always appreciate your feedback. See you in the next summary.